Welcome back to Big Asian Energy, and today we are diving in it with a solo podcast. And I want to talk about something that's kind of challenging to talk about, and that's the topic of tiger parenting. This is a big topic. If you are Asian from any area of the world where you are aware of stereotypes of Asians, specifically around stereotypes of East Asian parents and strict Asian parents. We're talking about things that you probably would have seen in memes like emotional damage, even racist TV show depictions. These are one of the most known stereotypes when it comes to being an Asian American. And it's a tough topic because it's also an experience that many of us, may not even be the majority, but many have experienced. For those who don't understand what Asian parenting is or what we're talking about as a stereotype or specifically tiger parenting is, there was a book written about this by a professor um, named Amy Chua. She talked about this concept of that Asian parents parent things differently. In fact, she penned an article about it called Why Chinese Parents Are Superior, which, as you can imagine, ruffled a few feathers. First and foremost, her description of her parenting style was pretty extreme to most Western viewers. It was things like 6 hours a day of piano practice. It was a thing of calling her children garbage or worthless, when at one point they wrote her a handmade birthday card and she looked at it and called it garbage because she is like, you can do better. And all of these things, taking away and threatening to burn her teddy bears, banning her from sleepovers, all of these things, any kind of friendship that wasn't specifically guided towards their academic success was banned. And her justification for this was that, well, I love them, so I'm trying to push them to be their best, push them to succeed, teach them resilience, have them succeed academically. And that was her argument. She's like, true love is about that, not about the Western model of of parenting, which was, in her view, what we call permissive parenting, not setting boundaries, not setting rules, letting them pursue whatever they want, and not guiding and teaching and disciplining them. Which, by the way, is also a stereotype that a lot of people I've talked to on this other side have of the other side. They think that this is what Western parenting looks like. They would say, oh, there's Asian parenting, Western, parenting, and Western parenting is so permissive. They never say no to their kids. And that's also a stereotype because, as we know, that's also not true. But the kind of idea that we look at in terms of Western parenting is that Western parenting is what we usually refer to as permissive parenting. And then if we dive deeper into why Amy Chua talks about this as this is how Chinese parents parent, is because of Confucian values. Those who aren't aware, there is a man named Confucius who talked about these core philosophical values that became the dominant way of thinking in ancient China. This was then passed on and culturally spread through other countries like Korea and Japan and surrounding areas. However, there's also the overarching concept of collectivism, which is also a differentiating point between the East and the West. So Eastern societies are oftentimes, we're talking about even, including South Asia like India, Pakistan, but also most predominantly East and Southeast Asia, which is, we're going down from, Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, and then we're looking into Philippines, et cetera, et cetera. Every country has different degrees, and even subcultures have different degrees. Like there is no like universal collectivist society versus universal individualist society. They just work. There's just like spectrums. So in Western, or what we usually refer to as more individualistic societies, the main value is the individual. It's your self-determination. You are independent in the world. Your immediate family is there to support you, but generally speaking, it's your life and your choices. A simple way of looking at this in comparison is that oftentimes in individualist cultures, when children hit 18 or becomes an adult, there's an expectation that they would then move out and kind of create their own new family unit. In Asian cultures and collectivist cultures, the family is a singular unit. So there's a more common sight that children will not move out, that when they become adults, they simply get jobs and start contributing back into the family because the family is a singular unit. And then over here, the individual is. In both cultures, There is success. It's just ways of how we function. There is no such thing as better or worse. What we've seen is that both work. It's just how they function. If you go to a more collectivist culture like Japan, for example, the way that you see people interact oftentimes is different. And there's a lot of these subcultural values that we talk about. Achievement is one, honor is another one. This kind of like value of humility and very focused around like your own achievement is not just yours, it is a reflection of your family's. And vice versa. If you have faults, then it's also in some ways tied to your families. So this is all very important because in a second, we're going to see why it is that these two elements are. So, how that Confucianism started taking place and develop is we started seeing how Asian cultures will prioritize education. So, if you look at China, Japan, Korea, all of these places have a strong focus around academic achievement and test taking. In China, for example, they do this one big test called Gaokao. It's like it defines your life because getting into a good school means you get into a better job, means you get out of, if your family was struggling or living maybe, more poverty, it will literally take you and put you in the top levels and top tiers because that's how big of a difference it is. And this is cultural, right? Like going back to Chinese history, it used to be that people would go to become a government worker, to work for the government was a high level thing. You have to go and take a test. And if you get a test and your outcome was good, then you got a very high honor job, right? That paid well, you have power, like it was a big deal. So that was part of that culture. And that passed on to now, and the way that we look at it now is also still a very big test. And all countries have standardized testing, but usually it's on this level of cultural. So what I mean by that is that the Chinese societies during the time of Gaokao literally will have cities shut down. Like during the times of the test, they have laws that prohibit any traffic from around test taking sites to honk, to make noises, or even just in general, try to like stay clear of that area. The whole country like resets elements of itself in so many different ways. Like they'll reroute planes. They'll like shift to, make sure that there's more room for people to travel into. Hotels would open up rooms for test takers and parents and family to stay for free. Like it's incredible how much the society bands together for this. And so you can imagine the pressures of this being so huge because it's not just about your result. Your result is your family's result. Right? It's not just your success. Your success means so much, it reflects on your family. So we see this extreme pressure take place. Students, when they are finished with schooling, usually already later on compared to North American, schools, will go to cram schools. And what cram schools are is essentially an after-school program in which you continue to learn and study and, take tests because so much of the focus, especially previously, I think they're getting better now, where it was on rote memorization, right? So like your ability to take in complex information, do math questions, all these kind of things, right? Major, major, major thing. So it was a lot of pressure. Like you literally see entire families try to cheat, like mom and dad outside on a laptop and like, two-way radios and the kid on the inside with like a super spy hidden little speaker on the outside. Like it's crazy. The people will show you the past cheating mechanisms that they use and it's nuts. But it was a big deal. This was a life-defining, familial-defining thing. Your failure again is their failure. And we see this, like it is not uncommon for a household to spend 30% of their monthly expenditure on hiring tutors for their kids. That was an actual stat. I think this is for Korea. And we see again, Japan, Korea, exactly the same thing. There's an extreme amount. There are tutors in those cram schools who are paid millions of dollars because of how good they are, because it was such a focus. Like they treat it as if it's going to war. They have kids who are in cram schools with IV drips to replenish their energy and cameras that make sure that they're studying all the time. And I know this because I ran a cram school. I started a cram school, but I want to do it differently. I wanted to do it more humanely. That's kind of my mini apology. If you're a past student of mine back in the day who's watching this, please let me know if I was actually one of those teachers, because I really, really, really hope I wasn't. I try my best. But it was part of the culture, it's part of that society. So we take that same thing and we magnify it by taking a family from this household and they become immigrants in the land. They're now in North America. They're now in Europe. They're now in a different part of the world that doesn't have the same cultural values as they do. And of course, the kids who are born in this new country or who are born in this new environment haven't changed much, but they understand the effects of it. The belief behind tiger parenting is that the parent knows best and the child must obey. And this is an important thing because they saw that as teamwork and they see this as love. It is the love of a parent who keeps their children away from making bad choices and to make sure that they succeed academically. That's Amy Chua's ideology. And very specifically, that this works. That's the belief. It's painful, it's difficult. No parent wants to hit their child. No parent wants to yell at their child. No parent wants to punish their child. They do it in pain in service of love. That's the explanation of it. But what they're not necessarily seeing, perhaps, is all the parental pressures of like, yes, it's for love, but it's also for me. It's also so that I can make sure that I see myself as a good parent and others view me as a good parent, right? I've gone through all these sacrifices for you. So therefore, it's your job to repay those sacrifices with your own sacrifices. And that's unavoidable, even if the parent never says this, by the way. And we understand this from psychology that that could be so invisible but so ever present, just parents talking about their struggles, we call riding the guilt train, right? It's like, oh, I work so hard, right? Like, I know, mom, and I'm so sorry, right? Like, there's that sense of guilt that we hold, and even if it's not from a place of expectation, it could still create a lot of pressure. But then what that pressure leads to is where it gets tough. Because the question was always, this is going to make you better. But the truth is, new studies that have contrasted parents who are using that type of what they call authoritarian, which is tiger parenting, methods, right? High top-down ideology, structure, criticism, focus on intensity, achievement focus, even achievement-focused love, which is like you only get love when you're achieving something, like, oh, I'll only give you positive attention and praise when you've gotten a good mark on a test. We see comparisоnism, which is like constantly saying that, oh, you're doing okay, but there's somebody else who could do better, right? There's an emphasis on lack, which is to say like, oh, you brought back 90%. Okay, that's not like terrible, but what happened to the last 10%? Or what happened to the last 5%? Or so and so their kids, they got this mark, I'm just curious what happened to that, right? Like that focus on where you're lacking, all of this starts creating a deeper mental belief. And that belief structure, especially given the fact that so much of these testing is focused on repetition, rote memorization, essentially quells any ability to critically think, right? Because there's a right answer, and your job is to figure out what the right answer is and fit into it. So there's a right answer, not just for your test, there's a right answer for you. There's a version of you that's right. And every other version, therefore, is inferior because the belief behind it is so focused around this. So that pressure that we're taking on, the emotional pressure of the self-sacrifice, the physical pressure of the expectations, the external pressure of what you're supposed to do, and that you also want to be seen by other people as success, your whole society around you has valued essentially prestige. So therefore you buy into it regardless of whether or not you want to, right? It's a big deal. You want to go to Harvard. Why? You have no idea how many times I've talked to children about this. I'm like, back when I was working with the students, I would sit with these kids, sometimes as young as middle school. And, I would just have a chat with them with their parents present, of course. And I'm like, yeah, so what do you want to do? And they were like, I want to go to, Harvard. And I go, why? And they're like lost. They're like, because it's Harvard. I'm like, what do you want to study? They're like, I don't know. I don't know, because they're taught that there's like 3 jobs in the world. Sometimes they're like, yeah, they could be a doctor, which means going to medicine, which means biology, right? They could be an engineer, which means going to STEM, right? Or you can be a failure, which means going to arts. That's a joke. That's a joke. I went into arts. But that was a joke. That was a common belief. And it was that, no, it didn't matter because the name is everything. The name matters more than the career after it. So it's a scary thing because once they're there, they're like, okay, I got into the school. Now what? I came out of the school, I got into a job. Like, now what? Is this it? Like, is this all life is? Like, this is what I've worked so hard for and sacrificed so much for, and they go through this kind of like, almost like an existentialist crisis, and I talk to a lot of them a lot. Many of my past students eventually end up becoming clients of mine, who work with me on specifically on these things we're talking about and, like, unraveling these, like, mindset blocks. But it's nuts. Because now we're taking into that consideration, we also see how that impacts the students in the long run and their self-esteem and their self-worth and their mental health, right? Like suicide is one of the leading causes of death among young Asian people. It's like in Asian American psychological reviews, for example, they found that Asian American children, I think from the ages of 14 to 21, I want to say, the number one cause of death is self-harm. Right? So, like, it's really deep, like, this kind of thing that we're seeing is having an emotional impact, the stress, the pressures, but we're not and that's from the ones that we deem as a failure, right? Like, that's the languaging that it becomes. It's like, "Oh, you struggled as a result of our pushing you. You failed morally at not having the emotional resilience and moral fortitude to have not properly withstood that pressure, which was for your own good." Right? Let's not even talk about that for a second, because let's face it, nobody in those communities want to talk about it at all anyway, right? It's all very hush hush. Like, what will people say? What will people think? Like, we can't talk about mental health. Let's talk about this part here, the successes. Why is this such an important thing? Because these people that we have deemed as successes, oftentimes are actually the ones who are struggling invisibly. They go through things like it's not even like they go through things like burnout. They experience so much perfectionism that they become paralyzed. They become so paralyzed by their like, if I take action, then I'm going to be judged on it. And if it's not perfect, then people will see it and I will be outed as a fraud, right? This belief that they have because it's so much pressure was always on achievement and externalized achievement. Of course, if they've only ever learned that external motivation and external achievement matters here, then of course over here, the only thing they want as adults is like praise from other people. Because that's the only sense. How do you like, okay, well, what about self-worth? What about self-love? It's like, well, yeah, but they've been taught never to trust self-worth here, right? They've been taught here that like, oh, like you're proud of something, like, oh, here, I got a B, I'm proud. It's like, you shouldn't be proud of that. You shouldn't be proud of that. You should be proud if you get an A, right? There's not that recognition of effort. There's only recognition of outcome. So of course, over here, they become people pleasers, right? They become focused on like, I need to have externalized achievement. And the next externalized achievement is going to be the one that finally gets me everything I want, right? Like that belief system becomes very difficult to handle. And that creates ironically, the thing that keeps them back. But more importantly, is sociologists that went and did research across the board found that students who were growing up and were taught in tiger parenting methodology, authoritarian parenting methodology, did worse academically than the kids who were raised with supportive parenting. Imagine that. Right? Because the belief was always, well, I'm forced to do this. I don't want you to have to go through this and struggle, but I have to because otherwise you won't succeed. Ironically, does worse than the group that's like, no, I'm here to support you in finding your goals, and I want to give you positive feedback so you're continuously more motivated. Right? It's like, oh, like I'm being told today that something I did was really good, even though I could have done better. Nope, it was just really good. And look at how hard you worked. Look at how much effort you've put in. Look at the ways that you try to solve this problem. That progress is worthy of celebration, and we focus on that. Which kid is more likely to want to be creative? Which kid is more likely to want to take more chances? And this is the other big thing, right? Because if you're so constantly graded over here, if you're so constantly measured over here by every output you do, and then criticized when it's not enough, even on occasion, even if it's only a small little bit, what does the belief come into? Well, I better not take risks. How can I take risks? How can I try something that won't get me into a university? Well, how can I try something that won't support this journey? If I'm going to take risks, then I might fail at it, right? If there's not a reason I'm not doing it, so everything has to be for an outward achievement, then I might fail at it. So there's no risk or creativity. Whereas this person here is like, hey, you're rewarded for and recognized for your efforts. You have a growth mindset. Your main focus is on areas of innovation and development. You're more likely to say, well, let me try 10 different things so I can find that two that excels beyond this person, because that becomes the issue. So the irony of all of this is that study after study, research after research, we are seeing that this type of parenting is not working. And we are seeing it at a very deep level because they become much less capable of critical thought. They become less, they're more self-critical, as in they question their own decisions more. Like those who are coming from this tiger parenting mindset, oftentimes they become much more scared of making the wrong choices, because in this other method, the other thing about this what we call authoritarian parenting, this path is that this path has always had a path that was chosen by the parent, or at least heavily influenced by the parent, right? So like there's this expectation, okay, if I do A, then I'll get a B. And if I do B well, then I get a C. And if I do C well, then I get a D. And I do D well, I can get et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And suddenly they are now in the real world and they're waiting for their A. They're waiting for someone to come and tell them that you're doing great. This is good. This thing you're doing is good. So they live oftentimes in this sense of imposter syndrome, because they go like, no one's given me an A in a while. Like, am I being a good parent? Am I being a good worker? Like, am I doing well in life? I have no idea. I feel like I'm kind of making it up. So there's this lack of external valuation system that allows that sense of certainty when they make choices, what we call confidence, right? What is confidence? Somebody who's confident in their own choices. They're assertive. When they go into a situation when they're doing something new, they're not afraid because they have the confidence of failure, right? Confidence is built through failure. Confidence is built through, I tried it, I didn't get exactly what I wanted, I survived through it, and I realized, oh, I can go and solve a problem, right? Because otherwise you live in this kind of tense perfectionism where it's like, oh, if I mess it up one time, then I'm a failure, right? So this path becomes so ultra linear that people then come out of it and go, I don't know what's next. I don't know what my purpose is. I feel empty and I feel stuck. So they get stuck in a rut. They get stuck in patterns of the same thing over and over again because they're just still trying to play out the same path that they already done in their childhood. That was the one thing that worked, right? And then they get demotivated. They feel stuck in their relationships. They don't know how to communicate with their partners anymore, because even in their communication, they're still just trying to be validated and seen, and yet they're also trying to individuate at the same time. So there's this lostness. So this, by the way, again, stereotype, and also modern day, most Asian parents moving on from this already, they are already focused on this. What does this look like? Authoritative, what we call authoritative, sounds so similar to authoritarian, I know. I use another term, I use dolphin parenting to describe the middle ground. This is kind of like the Goldilocks parenting. It's dolphin parenting is not a my word, it's actually coined by Dr. Khan, who wrote, I'm trying to remember the exact name. I think it's like The Way of the Dolphin, or like the dolphin method or dolphin parenting. She's a she's a wealth of expertise. She wrote a book specifically about this parenting style, which is what we call authoritarian. Authoritarian is meant to be supportive, like a dolphin, right? Like, so it's like, as opposed to the jellyfish, who is permissive, doesn't have any kind of backbone, as opposed to tiger, which is overly dominating and like overpowering, you have a, this is how dolphins swim. You have a dolphin. Dolphins guide, right? It's like you have your own path. I'm here to nurture and guide and advise you, and then perhaps coach as well as keep you accountable. So discipline is part of that. Structure is part of that, but the structure is always based on, okay, let's take a look at the goals you want to set. Let's navigate what comes up, and realizing that lack of motivation or laziness, which we'll get to another time, lack of motivation is just another obstacle. Let's sit down and take a look. This is still a goal that you want. You set it. We negotiated on understanding why. We help you set it. Let me keep you accountable, right? Using systems. Discipline is still a part of this. Structure has to be a part of this. But the foundational energy is love and support. I'm here to support you in your growth. I'm not here to dictate. I would challenge you. I will ask you questions. I will get you to ask me questions. We will question things together. We will explore and learn together. And in that self-exploration and learning, you are learning agency, individuation. You are learning how to self-teach, self-correct. You're learning a self-awareness, what your limitations are when you're overconfident. You're learning decision-making and understanding how to problem solve live in situations where you might need to make a quick decision and not worry about right and wrong, as in like, did I make a mistake or not? But learning that if I make a mistake now, can I correct it later? And all those things that teach independence, confidence, social skills, emotional regulation, and funny enough, emotional resilience. Because this does not teach emotional resilience. When you're bearing emotions down, when you don't know how to handle them, so you just buckle, like you kind of like repress and repress and repress, like this is not actual resilience. At some point, this cracks and you will crack and then everything falls apart. This is where burnout happens, right? This is where people have sudden like overwhelm. They go into these stages because so focused on rigidity that the belief is that resilience is not about knowing how to bend and how to absorb and how to heal and how to be present and process, which is actually the balance, understanding that, okay, I did something that had a consequence I didn't want. Now I get to let go of the story that this is because I am something wrong, right? And that I can hold myself and handle that emotional process. Because oftentimes over here, what does it turn out? It becomes anxiety, right? It becomes extreme self-criticism, right? It becomes this very black and white thinking. Whereas this allows for emotional processing. So that's where real resilience essentially comes through. All of this, the truth is a complex topic. Parenting is impossible. If you're a parent watching this or listening to this, I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Because even just listening and processing and thinking about this, you've already done the work. So often I have parents reaching out to me and they're saying, I just realized I'm a tiger parent. And you have no idea how difficult that conversation often feels. I was sitting across from a friend at a restaurant and we were chatting about all of this that was going on, that, you know, what I was doing research around at the time the book was writing. And she was like, I'm not a tiger parent. I don't hate my kids. And I said, of course you don't, because that's not who you are. And you know that creates harm. It's inexcusable. Nobody should ever hate your kids. It's the worst thing you can do. It's I won't get into it, but just it's never that the number of times you should hit kids is zero. In the same way that the number of times you should discipline another equal human being physically is zero. If you wouldn't do it to your wife, you wouldn't do it to your kids. Put it that way. When we're thinking about the idea of tiger parents, we're chatting, and she was like, "I never hit my kids." I'm like, "Of course not." And she's like, "I never yell at them. I didn't give them high expectations." And as we're talking through this list of things we talk about, like, like how often are you promoting their ideas? How often are you only validating when they've succeeded in something? And we look at the expectations and how those things can subtly come through. She suddenly had a moment and she was like, "Oh my God, like I'm my own parent. Like I'm my mom." And she had this realization and she's like, "Oh my gosh, those like that pressure was so present. And I had put my pressure on me, on them, right? Like their success, I saw that was my success. And I still do these things." And it was such a deep moment where she's like, "Oh my gosh, like I just did what my parents did. I just thought I dressed it up differently." And I said, "Yeah, of course, because that's the only type of parenting you've ever known. How could you do something else?" Like, you know, I've always loved this. It's like, you can ask someone. I would have asked her, would be like, "Do you speak Italian?" And she probably would have said no. And I'll say, "Why not?" And she's like, "Well, because I didn't learn it from my parents." I'm like, "Yeah, exactly." Right? Like loving is a form of language. Knowing how to deal with your child is a language. These are things we learn to speak. And if your parents didn't teach you love languages and how to listen for them and how to receive that as love and taught you something differently, then you will continue to teach that to your children because that's how that process is passed on. That's how those patterns are passed on. They're just passed on from parent to child. And it's unavoidable. It's unavoidable that we're always gonna have some parts of our parents are in us as we parent, but that's a great thing in some ways, as long as you're conscious or clear of where it comes from and that you're in control of deciding what is right for you, right? So this is a very it's a difficult journey, and I just wanna say if you're a parent listening to this, thank you. The greatest work you can ever do for your child is working on yourself. The work you can ever do is looking at your the patterns that you've had, where they come from, and how they show up, because it's not up to your child, obviously, that you know this, right, to reflect on you. They're on their own journey, you're on yours. Your job is to nurture and support, of course, and you're doing a good job of it. You're trying your best, and you're doing a good job of it. So it still comes back, but when it come back to, this is still a hotly debated topic. There are still so many parents who still believe and carry that belief that the old methods of tiger parenting is the better form because that's all they knew. That was what they were learning, that's what they were taught, or because they generally just believe in it. And there are some who will believe that things have changed, people have changed, and we now have a deeper understanding of that. What about you? Leave in your comments, do you support or are you against tiger parenting? Leave in the comments below. I'll love to hear from you.